and welcome to the How to CEO podcast. I'm your host, Murray Newland. When you decided to become a CEO, the world changed. You can either crash and burn, or you can make an amazing company. In this episode, we're going to be looking at what CEOs need to know about investment bankers and specifically tech investment bankers. I'm delighted to be joined by Vitaly from GS Capital. Vitaly, please introduce yourself and more about what you do.
Hi, my name is Vitaly Golomb. I'm the managing partner of GS Capital, a tech investment bank based in Bay Area, but doing lots of work globally, especially with European companies. I was previously a partner at HP's corporate venture arm, HP Tech Ventures, where we first met, Murray. And what I focus on now is primarily three things: helping growth stage companies raise capital from the right investors, both corporate and financial and family offices in some cases. We help companies sell themselves, or if they get approached, help them negotiate and structure the right deal. In some cases, we are on the buy side, where large companies hire us to put together a strategy and go find them the right target to acquire and help them negotiate the deal. And then we do something quite unique in the industry, which is we call corporate venture advisory. We essentially function as an outsourced corporate venture department for companies, especially if they don't have proper presence in Silicon Valley.
So, why are founders typically coming to you? What is that? What are the typical reasons they come to you, and what do those models look like?
Yeah, so with early stage, when you talk about seed stage or very early stages of a company, the investment decision is primarily based on the team. Right? You take a look at the opportunity as an investor, and I've been on all sides of the table at this point. You take a look at the opportunity, you make a judgment whether you believe this is the right team to attack that problem, and then you want to bet on that pony. When you get to later stages, it's a much more technical approach to capital raising. The valuation of the company is much more based on revenues and your velocity of growth. And it gets a lot more technical, a lot more work. And this is where CFOs and COOs take a lot of the load off of the CEO for fundraising. So this is where a lot of companies choose to take a partner in an investment bank to involve them and helping them raise capital, especially when you're talking about companies that are outside of Bay Area, which are not in the midst of Sand Hill Road, can go up and down and have that network. Or we're talking about increasingly more companies that really have a global picture. So, for example, I work with a lot of transportation and mobility companies. That's not really just a Sand Hill Road type of thing. There are lots of participants, lots of strategics all over Europe, all over Asia, that are highly, highly interested in this category. And in fact, just China itself is almost 40% of the electric vehicle market globally at this point. So that's one part of it. On the capital raise, on the part of selling themselves, a lot of times companies are doing great and they attract attention, and there might be a young founder that's doing this for the first time. They get targeted by a big company to take them out, and they put an offer on the table. And the founders, they get really nervous because they have no idea how to negotiate what's a good deal. So just like they need lawyers for a lot of things, they certainly need bankers to help them structure the right exit if they choose to go that way and handle the whole process. It's not just as simple as somebody pushing a napkin with a number across the table. It's usually a process that takes 3 to 6 months. It's highly technical. There's due diligence, there's legal issues, there's structuring the earnout, and certainly you can use a helping hand there from somebody who has done it many times before and knows how to structure something that's not going to come back and bite you in the butt. So those are the primary things. I think a lot of founders don't understand who investment bankers are. Yeah. I certainly get a lot of seed stage pitches from founders on LinkedIn still, not understanding that I'm actually there to help them raise capital eventually when they get to later stages. So it's really important for them to understand that we're essentially a service provider to help companies that are growing quickly find the right partners and structure the right deals.
So, what stage, or what capital raise size, or revenue? What are the factors involved in deciding that the company is big enough to go to investment bankers? What size of deal Because presumably as a service provider, there's like, you have your structure. What does your structure look like? And also,
Yeah.
what does that client profile look
Yeah, we certainly don't take everybody who walks in. We're not a Starbucks. We don't have the bandwidth. Every project takes literally hundreds of hours by the time you're done with it. It's a based model. It's usually a small single-digit percentage of the transaction, and you have to really be willing to invest those hundreds of hours of your team's time into a project. So you have to have that certain belief level. Um, and not every project, far from every project is successful. So we look at projects that usually starting around, say, $20 million capital raise. That's when the company is pretty mature, has revenue usually, and is really ready to scale. And at that point, it actually makes sense to bring in, especially strategic investors who can do something with that company. So a lot of times we might structure a partnership or a joint venture alongside an investment from a corporate or a strategic investor. So really probably the place, it's certainly not seed capital. It's not, $200,000 first that's not a where
Hello, are you still there? I seem to have some breakup on my side of the video. Let's hope that did record, because we are recording in the cloud, so I think we're recording from your side. So okay, so you're coming to raise rounds of about $20 million plus. What does that process look like from the founder's perspective?
That's a very good question. So our job is to run a very organized, very formal process. What that means is that if we're doing a capital raise or we're doing M&A, it's similar in that way, where we will come up with a list of potential investors or potential buyers. In most cases, from folks we've already have a relationship with, we've talked to in the past, that are in our database, that we match up based on rationale and that we think is a good fit. That list could be easily 100, 200 or more different contacts. We run a very formal sales process through our CRM, like anybody should if they're contacting a lot of folks. And what we do is we put together a presentation, we put together a teaser, we put together nice clean financials. At some point, maybe not right away, but throughout the process, we'll put together due diligence, a data room, where everything is nice and organized for the potential investor or buyer, so it can speed up the process. And our team will reach out to our contacts, present the company, try to generate interest. If we do find a match, we'll typically handle the first pre-screening calls and meetings to make sure there really is a match, and then follow up and schedule time with the management team as a second phase. And in that phase, we already kind of have a nice, good match, and the investor or the buyer, they're starting to kind of poke around and get to know the team. And then from there, it's kind of three parties working together to see if we can get to a deal.
So from a founder perspective, if I want to engage someone such as yourself, does it matter if should I do my homework first and get my data room cleaned up, tidy? Do you come across great startups where you come across them and you're just like the back end is not organized, and you just think, okay, that's just going to be too much work to take on that disorganized mess? Does that play a factor, or what are the factors which go into play when you think about taking on different?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a red flag if the company is disorganized. It's like if somebody has a very disorganized desk, they're probably a little bit disorganized in how they think. So if we encounter a business that's a complete mess, we certainly won't feel confident presenting it. We do our part in professionalizing a lot of things. A lot of times we'll see founders who have, even at that stage, have a part-time CFO. Well, the CFO, they're not in Bay Area, they're somewhere else. They're not really skilled or experienced in managing tech companies and doing projections. So many times, I'd say most times, we end up working with a team to redo the financials, clean them up, put them in a nice standard professional format. So there's a lot of cleanup that happens. That certainly is part of the process. What we focus on is to see if we're going to be effective, because we want to only make promises or projections that we can keep, and we certainly don't want to waste our own time with a project that the market we don't think will support. So we try to be as frank and honest with the founders as we possibly can to make sure that they have the right expectations and that we run a process that has a very good chance of success.
And so let's talk about what are some of the red flags and some of the things that can make this process more successful.
I have the benefit of being on the venture side for a number of years as well, and really the signals. It may be different for bankers who are bankers from diapers, and there's certainly lots of people that go to business school and then right into banking without having any operational experience or investment experience. But in my case, my filter is really tuned to what investors would be looking for, which is, can I trust the team? Is this the right team? Do they have a plan and not just a vision? Are they executing on that plan? We want to see all those things coming together. We want to have the confidence, because if we go to essentially a lot of our friends who are on the buy side, on the investment side, and we represent this company and make a recommendation, if we more than once recommend something that ends up being at worst fraud or at least kind of unreliable, certainly that hurts our credibility as well. So that's we're careful in that it's a big part of our values, our reputation, because otherwise people will stop picking up the phone when we call. So from that perspective, I'm just looking for good, solid, fundable companies with really inspiring and smart entrepreneurs running behind it, that I would feel comfortable recommending and putting my reputation behind.
Now, do different firms tend to focus on different niches and have different networks, or how does that work? What should you as a CEO look for in the firm you want to work with?
Well, investment bankers certainly have specializations. As I mentioned, a big part of what I do right now is focus on transportation and mobility, which is a red hot sector, and I have a lot of experience in it, a lot of big network in it, and probably one of the best networks out there in the industry. And certainly there are a lot of investment bankers, just like investors, that specialize in different categories, and they may have a more technical background. For example, I wouldn't touch pharmaceuticals because I don't have a background in that, and it's a highly technical field, just like many other factors. So there's media, there's fintech. All these categories are different industries with their own networks, with their own investors, with oftentimes their own investment bankers. If you can find a specialist for your niche, I'd highly recommend using somebody that speaks the language, that speaks your language and understands your business. Generalists, can kind of make things happen more or less, but specialists can always kind of talk the talk a little bit better, I would say.
Excellent. And speaking of specialists, who would you recommend in the industry? Who else do you think is doing a great job out there?
We partner with lawyers quite a bit. I would say there's one very well-known guy here in the Bay Area in M&A world, Larry Chu at Goodwin, who's a friend and always fun to banter with. We also work with DLA Piper, of course, for a number of years. So there are lots of great professionals. We're very fortunate in the Bay Area, especially, to have such a built-out ecosystem. In other parts of the world, it's a little bit tougher to find people with such experience.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on the show. If people want to connect with you, how do they do that?
You can find us at gscap.co online. You can find me on Twitter. I don't tweet a whole lot, but Vitaly G, Vitalyg. You can also buy my book on Amazon if you are a first-time founder, especially. It tends to be helpful. It's called Accelerated Startup. And generally, if you find me online, I'm pretty responsive. And I try to be helpful as much as I can for all the entrepreneurs. I've been in the trenches before this for a good 16 years on my own, with 3 of my own companies. So all the knees and my jeans are worn out from begging for money as an entrepreneur. I feel the pain, and I try to help as much as I can.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm Murray Newlands. You've been listening to the How to CEO podcast. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.